Hello, this is Madeleine. Now, I don't plan on doing intro segments for every episode moving forward, but I felt it was appropriate to do it for this one for a few reasons. First, this is the very first guest episode that we have on the podcast. And second is this ends up being quite a lengthy episode that I don't think either of us were planning for. I tried to trim it down a little bit, but there's so much there in this conversation. And so I really don't want you to miss out on any of the pieces of this story. So it is a little bit lengthy. Please listen to the whole thing. And lastly, the release date for this episode is actually quite significant. And I didn't know the significance of it as I was planning out this season and mapping out release dates. But this is being released on Monday, July 7th. And you will hopefully hear why that date is significant as you listen to this podcast. And yeah, just carry that significance with you. And I wanted to bring this to your attention because I think that life is full of these magical moments of things aligning and coming together in certain ways without us navigating and forcing, and it just happens if we let life do the thing. Obviously, we need to take action and do the thing too, but life really leads us in these subtle ways. So, I hope you enjoy this story. Here we go. Hello and welcome. My name is Madeleine Longoria Garcia, and these are our other stories. Today on the podcast, we have Victoria Magaña Ledesma, who is a first-gen Latina and the founder of Misma Lani Farms, based on the Kona side of Hawaii Island. Thank you, Victoria, for being here, and welcome.
Thank you, Madeleine. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, me too. So, as I mentioned in the first episode of the season, we are exploring the theme of sharing migration stories and families' migration stories through the perspectives of the folks who are coming on this podcast. And, allowing you all to share what your experiences are, the stories that you know from your families as well, and really just how this thread connects a lot more people in our lives than I think most folks in the United States realize. And trying to use these stories to show more people that immigration stories are everywhere in this nation, especially. And so, yeah, thank you for being here, and thank you for being open to having this conversation. And I know that this is one facet of your life. I know that it's been a large facet of your life. And I know that you have really grown into using your voice to tell this story too. So it isn't necessarily something that's not out there. But I do hope we can kind of maybe explore a little bit more than the way that this story has been shared and told through the media, which I know that's been like a big thing and a big part of your family's story. Yeah, I don't know, just the way that you maybe feel like you can share, to what extent you feel like you can share through your website and the business. And I know there is a whole process of going through that too that maybe we'll talk about as well. But yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit further than that too here?
Yeah, thank you so much for that intro. And I will say that as I evolve and grow and share the story, it grows and evolves as well. And I can share it in different ways, maybe giving a bit more detail or having processed it more. Because even the first times that I would share it, it came through a lot of pain. So I've continuously worked on healing, and I think that helps me process and be able to share in a way where people can relate or understand. So, and the media and media just tends to have like a face, just a very non-complex, it doesn't go into much detail. So it's always really great to be able to have these conversations on a deeper level. But Yeah, I'm Victoria Magaña Ledesma. I've even practiced saying because the enye is funny out here in Hawaii. A lot of people pronounce it Magana, and I've just like leaned into that and grown
Mm-hmm.
into that, and I'm practicing. I'm practicing how to share and correct people and be like, "You can do it. You can do it."
Mm-hmm. 100%.
This is a place where we do honor the correct pronunciation of names, right? So I'm like, why I should be able to do that. But yeah, I'm the owner of Misma Lani Farms, a Kona coffee farm management company and processing mill here in South Kona, in Hona now. And I'm a daughter of Mexican immigrants. So I'm first gen, raised in the coffee fields. And it's been a whirlwind growing up here in Hawaii as a Mexican American, just having so many parts of my
Mm-hmm.
identity. But yeah, we sell Kona coffee, and I'm second generation coffee farmer slash processor. Honored to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So there's a couple of things there I would love to get into, but maybe let's start just in terms of like a timeline at the quote unquote beginning of your family story and coming here. And I want to leave that up to you of where you want to start, because I feel like there might be a couple of different starting points that you could
Oof.
choose. Just for folks to know too, like Victoria and I have known each other for several years now and had the opportunity to have a lot of conversations about our families, our identities as Latinas, as Mexican Americans, as people who are still connected to the country where our families are from. And yeah, so there are some things that I might be leading Victoria into sharing, or yeah, I don't know. So yes, I would say wherever you want to like start with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the starting point that I usually use is my parents' migration story of when they came to Hawaii, which was or to America, California, America, U.S. Oh gosh, yeah, which was in the 90s. I would choose that one. So in the 90s, my parents crossed the border for, I would say, like the final time because my
Hmm.
dad had been migrating back and forth since he was 15. And yeah, he migrated across the border that last time, and so did my mom. My mom came separately with my grandparents and some siblings of her that were still living in Michoacan, Mexico. They probably lived in California for about 3 years. So my parents were dating back home in the village,
Hmm.
and then they got together out in California, had me. I was born there. And by the age of 3, they had migrated to Hawaii. Yeah, my father worked in the citrus fields in California, but the lifestyle was very crowded, the
Mm.
living situations.
Hmm.
And there was an ad in one of those companies. They had been recruiting for labor out in Hawaii for the coffee fields. And so he came out here for a harvest season, really liked it. It wasn't as gruesome as, carrying an 80-pound bag of oranges or avocados,
Mm.
whatever it was. It was a 40-pound bucket
Bucket.
strapped to your waist. And yeah, he also really liked the more relaxed life out here and just
Hmm.
so eventually in 1998
Hmm.
they made the move out here. My mom followed him out here with me, and
Hmm.
they made a life here. So I was raised here from the age of 3. Yeah,
Hmm.
I would say that's the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the points. Yeah.
Yes. So your dad came out. So he came out like for one harvest season first on his own and then went back to California and
I believe he had 2. He had two
Okay.
harvest seasons. So he came once, kind of liked it. Then he came out here again and was like, I'm gonna do it again. And that time they were supposed to. He decided to stay for a winter here
Mm.
because a lot of people left. A lot of the harvesters would leave, again to go back to Mexico. There were quite a bit of Mexican and Latino harvesters here, but they would leave. And so he kind of stayed to, what do they call it? Chinear, to do the last strip pickings.
Mm-hmm.
And time just kind of went on. The tiempo de fiestas were passing by, and he was like, well, it's too
Mm-hmm.
late, so let's just stay here. And so he stayed. He learned. That's when someone taught him, one of those farm owners were taught him how to prune, how to do the
Mm.
vertical selection, when to fertilize. So that's where him and a friend stayed behind. And that was like the 1 year that he stayed past the harvest season.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then when you all moved to Hawaii, he was working in the coffee fields, working on multiple farms, like harvesting coffee.
He was working on multiple farms, yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes they actually didn't really have work.
Mm.
Sometimes there were periods of time where he would be like, yeah, there'd be like 1 or 2 weeks where there wasn't any work, but we were okay. But he was working with that one farm where he would harvest, but then he would recommend my dad to other people. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
they would have
Which is
work
how
like
it
that.
goes. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this is how it goes in agriculture in general.
Mm-hmm.
I know specifically with coffee, like it's not a full-time job, at least in Hawaii, with one farm during harvest season. You have to be going
Yes.
amongst several different because of ripening periods and all of that stuff. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder. So you grew up in Hawaii, and you
Yes.
even talk about, as you mentioned at the beginning, that being even just like growing up in Hawaii, as I assume, like as first gen Latina, being very different, but also, again, you said this place that is so uh, a place that honors names and correct pronunciations and all of
Mm-hmm.
these things. And so I do wonder for you growing up as first gen Mexican American, did you speak Spanish at home? And then, like, that was your first language, and then speaking English when you first started going to school. What was that whole,
Oh God.
process like?
It's so funny because for the longest time, I would say that I learned both languages at the same time. And it wasn't until I had this one conversation about going to school for the first time here that I realized I spoke Spanish way before
Yeah.
English. I was probably one of like 4 or 5 students that were also Mexican
Okay.
in my little town school.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I tried to run away from my teacher for like a month straight. I was one of those ones that was like, I hated being at school. It felt very foreign, because I grew up, in the fields with the crew and just working with my parents and hearing all those stories and having my uncles like cracking jokes all day. And so when I finally, I was 5, there was no preschool. So yeah, I was probably a month before. It was a while. It was a couple weeks before I really understood anything. I do remember the first thing that I understood or the first thing that I remember ever understanding in English was your mom left, because my mom would wait until, say, it was horrible. She'd have to wait until it was like nap time, which was in the middle of the school day. And so I would fall asleep and then she'd like sneak out. Right. And yeah, I woke up one day. I remember the kid and he was like, your mom left. And I remember just kind of looking at him and I was like, I understood that, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah. So it was this weird, like, shit, my mom left. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's yeah.
But
There
I,
is cussing on this podcast.
okay, awesome.
Listed
Yeah.
as explicit. It's fine.
So I understood him and I was like, okay, I mean, yeah. And growing up, I also remember this time where there's always May Day, which is a
Mm-hmm.
festival of like dancing and Hawaiian tradition. And I grew up as a Mexican American who learned to dance hula in school, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
that was part of like our yearly thing. Um, and there was this, there's a lot that school really focused on cultural diversity, right,
Mm.
and showcasing everyone. There was all sorts of different cultural dances for different ethnicities, and our teacher made the 4 or 5 Mexican kids practice folklorico, right? And it was 5 of us. I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't even have enough for partners. I remember I was miserable during those
Mm.
practices. And even when we had to go up on that May Day, I was like, why are they making us do this? And now looking back, I'm very grateful for those teachers because even they
Mm.
saw it. With 5 students, they saw the need and they wanted us to celebrate our culture, even though
Yeah.
I couldn't understand it at that point. And we always had our community also, like, you know, parents show up and make tamales and make flan and pozole. And it wasn't ever, again, it's always like this melting pot of like, what is this dish? And like,
Yeah.
how do you guys eat it? There's always
Yeah.
like this genuine curiosity for wanting to eat the plate right. And what do we put on this, you know?
Yeah.
So those are core memories that I have from elementary school. Yeah. It was, yeah.
I I really love that. I think so being in elementary school for you, that would have been what, the late like 90s, early 2000s kind
Early
of time.
2000s. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like that experience, your experience that you're describing in an elementary school in Hawaii, is so different from what a lot of first generation folks from anywhere experience in most schools on the mainland, on the continental United States.
Hmm.
And it's even in places that people would assume would be more accepting, like California, for example.
Yeah.
A lot of the conversations I've had with folks are these memories of like having like traumatic experiences that they now realize as adults were traumatic experiences of being identified as different and other because they didn't speak English either at all, or they spoke it with an accent, or
Hmm.
they looked different from their peers, just based off of the color of their skin. And it's like, this is one of the things about Hawaii. It's been such a multicultural place for so long. And I think, oh, we can go into so much about like the history of like colonization and everything in Hawaii, but
Hmm.
the way that culture is really honored there, is it's something to share with people, to be proud of. And it's not only Native Hawaiian culture. And I see, I've seen this even today. Like, this is how the schools are. You bring a little piece of wherever your family is, quote unquote, originally from, and it's
Yeah.
celebrated in some way. And, even that memory of like May Day in Hawaii. May Day is Lay Day, is like that's the
Hmm.
phrase in Hawaii, where in the continental United States, May Day is a day of protest. It's the labor movement. It's against the man. It's against the powers, against like the corporate structures. But Hawaii has this whole different observation of that day that
Hmm.
is rooted in the celebration of cultures.
Hmm.
And so it's I just wanted to like share that and talk about that a little bit, because I think a lot of people don't realize that that is kind of embedded into the culture of, especially growing up, I think in Hawaii, like the childhood that I think a lot of kids have there is quite unique. And that's just from my own observations that I've had over the
Yeah, it's a
years.
complete privilege to have had this childhood.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, looking back, it's like I got to be a Princess of Oahu on the May Day court, on the Kings and Queen court, you know, and participate in a culture that is not necessarily mine through bloodline, but I in a sense felt accepted
Mm-hmm.
and to learn a culture that is being kept alive here, right? To honor it, to respect it, to play a part in it. But yeah, I think it's taught me that.
And to, yeah, be welcomed into it
Mm-hmm.
while also, I mean, this teacher maybe in the moment you hated being like, oh my gosh, we're gonna learn folklorico and like do this, what?
Like they're
But
gonna
this
see,
teacher who
yeah.
like even made that effort
Mm-hmm.
to realize it was worth connecting you all with that piece of
Mm-hmm.
your culture. I remember being a kid and watching folklorico. I grew up in Los Angeles and like seeing that at all of these celebrations and holidays and stuff. I always wanted to learn, and my parents never put me in classes for that. So I'm like,
Yeah.
man, I wish a teacher at my school would have done that.
Oh gosh, yeah. Maybe I'll go back and be that person for another set of kids today.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it's that's a really, again, just like interesting, it's an interesting experience to realize that you had that experience in Hawaii of feeling accepted and kind of welcomed and embraced from
Yeah. Yeah, I
childhood.
think there was probably, everyone has its own their own experience here.
Of course.
And maybe because I was so young when I
Mm-hmm.
when I started living here, there was probably only less than a handful of times that I remember experiencing any sort of other, like feeling like othered or like
Mm-hmm.
racism. There was this one kid who one day called me Mexican. And I was so confused. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I am. And
Mm-hmm.
it was engraved, but it's like those macro aggressions, I believe, instead of those micro ones that kind of like sometimes you're like so baffled by it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that was probably one time that I ever felt like that I remember feeling othered. And
Yeah.
other than that, not really, because, I'm of brown skin and my dad is even, darker than mine. And it, you really also blend in, right?
Yeah.
We are people of color out here,
Yeah.
definitely. So
Yeah.
that was, or at least in the community where I grew up. So there might be, that definitely probably plays a role in there. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've heard that from a lot of people who have experienced living on the continental United States and in Hawaii. People who are not white have been like, oh, it's just like you're way more quickly just part
It's,
of the community.
mm-hmm.
There's
Yeah.
nothing to really prove anywhere in Hawaii. Like, okay, you have dark brown skin. Cool. We all have dark brown skin too. Like,
Yes. Yep.
yeah. Yeah. And it's very interesting. Yeah. And I wonder if you've ever asked your parents, like, what that transition was like for them too. I mean, gosh, to go from Mexico, from Michoacan to California, and then just a few later is now to Hawaii. I mean, that's culture changes two times within a pretty short period of
Yeah.
time.
I think the community again in South Kona was so welcoming and so
Yeah.
kind that they, now I want to go back and ask all these questions, right? But that's the feeling that I would always get from when they would talk about these things. And also because and even more, there was like pidgin English here,
Right.
right? Hawaiian pidgin, which can be
Yeah.
characterized as like broken English, right? But like when my
It's a
parents,
whole own,
yeah,
like, yeah,
it's
it's
a
a
whole
whole
language.
language.
Yes. And but their English could blend into Hawaiian pidgin as
Got
well.
it. Yeah.
So even the language barrier was not, or you couldn't, I wouldn't say that they would face as much discrimination as they might have
Yeah.
elsewhere, right? Because of
Yeah.
that.
I would maybe assume that was even something that was attractive about being in Hawaii and like
Hmm.
moving out to the islands,
Hmm.
and your dad's first experiences there being like, okay, we're gonna come over here instead.
Hmm. Yeah. And I feel like people also try to speak a little bit of Spanish. So there's
Mm-hmm.
not like this entitlement of like speak English here. It's like what's your language? How do I say that in Spanish? Can you help me practice
Mm,
my Spanish? Uh,
mm-hmm.
there's people, there's that sentiment here too. So that probably played a part there too.
It's such a unique space to be in, and like, yeah, I hope that that maintains, as I mean, even in the
Yeah.
time that I lived in Hawaii, like it's changed a lot.
Hmm.
And we don't have to get too far down that rabbit hole, but it is something that I've had that thought a few times, and not even just as like Hawaii as a whole, but even pockets of different communities, seeing how shifts have happened and changes are happening very quickly, and being like, oh, I hope it like still maintains this like, yeah, community feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that. I've seen that growing up, 20 plus years here. And you do notice the difference. And you're just kind of holding on to your little, like you said, your little space where
Yeah.
you know the people, and it's still Hawaii, it's still home. But yeah, hopefully we maintain that.
Yeah, I mean, you grew up in this like very multicultural place. You got to experience being a part of and being welcomed into other cultures, not just like the Mexican community
Hmm.
in Kona, but the Native Hawaiian community, and I'm sure others as well.
Hmm.
Uh, and I wonder, so you left Kona, you went to Hilo for college.
Yes.
Was that, I mean, I know that it's just like quote unquote the other side of the island, but that's like it was like a 2 hour, 2.5 hour drive away.
Hmm.
Hilo it feels different. And I wonder too, like, I mean, and suddenly you're going to a college that there's also people from other states and other parts of the world coming there. And I'm always curious, I guess, for folks, like what that experience felt like for them. Because I know that my experience going to college felt like very different. I was not fully prepared for that on like a cultural level. And so, yeah,
Oh
what was
gosh,
that
I
like
was
for
the
you?
spoiled Kona girl who was always like, Hilo, no, it just rains there. Why would anyone want to live there? I was such a brat. And yeah, but I moved there for Hilo, for college. And I mean, I wanted to go elsewhere, but we couldn't afford that.
Yeah.
And I am so glad, right, that life takes you where you need to go, because Hilo to me really feels even more local than South Kona.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like so many businesses that are locally owned that just bring this entirely other vibe and energy than downtown Kona, like,
Yeah.
tourism hub out here. So I really felt even more at home. Sometimes
Mm.
I would joke around. I don't know how I feel about it now, but I would kind of say, like, if I could move coffee to Hilo and like live in
Yeah.
Hilo and work there, I would do that. I like Hilo better.
Oh, yeah.
uh, yeah. And going to school, actually, I, as a first gen, did not know how to navigate anything with college applications and FAFSA and all of those things. And so I had applied for a dormitory that was one of the lower, cheaper alternatives, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, for residents, and I missed the email because I didn't even know colleges had, like, you had a specific email, right? Like
Yeah. That they
whatever
make
dot
for you.
edu. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I had no idea because, again, I was navigating all of this on my own. And so I missed that deadline. I called and they were like, well, we had accepted you, but now it's been given to someone else and there are no more rooms other than
Mm.
the really expensive in, it's called Hale Alahonua. And I ended up dorming with international students. So that was
Hmm.
the dorm for international students. So I met people from all over the world, and that was a whole experience for myself. So I was in this place where and then I had friends from Kona that were also starting their college journeys. So I
Mm-hmm.
was in this place where I had, local friends. And because I grew up here, I believe those friendships are easier to make, even if they're from like a different town. So And I had these international students that were blowing my mind about like the world just in
Yeah.
regular conversation. They would just drop things that to them is known. But to
Mhm.
me, and a person who grew up on an island, even when
Mhm.
you do learn history, it doesn't connect, it doesn't click. So I
Yeah.
was learning just so much. Yeah, college was an eye-opening experience for myself.
Where were some of those students from?
Oh gosh, it was one, she was like, I'm from South Korea. No, she said, I'm from North Korea. And because I, again, so secluded, I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
cool. And she's like, no, girl, what the heck? I was like, what? So we had to go through that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, South Korea, Zimbabwe, um,
Wow,
Norway, Sweden, Japan. Yeah, those were some of the,
cool.
yeah.
I
So,
didn't realize there was like such a diverse range of international students at UH Hilo.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
that's cool.
yeah. And UH Hilo's like slogan is literally number one diverse college in the nation.
Oh,
That's
okay, cool.
they throw that everywhere they can. Now with the
Wow,
whole DEI, I was like, you guys better not roll back because that's your number
that's like
one
your
point.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oof.
yeah.
Wow.
Mhm,
What a unique college experience. I mean, I'm just even reflecting on my own experience. It was not like that at all. As I mentioned, I grew up in Los Angeles and never kind of similar to you, just like never really felt singled out or othered in any way.
mhm,
Um, it was just everybody was I don't know. We went to schools that were pretty diverse.
mhm,
And I went to college in the Northwest, and it was a very white population at the university, and I was like, "Oh, this is different," and that like
mhm.
made me be like, "Huh, yeah, I stick out a lot, and I do feel very different." And so, yeah, just again, it's really interesting, I think, for you to share how unique the culture of growing up in Hawaii is,
Oh yeah,
because it
and even
truly is.
yeah, and some of the general requisites or for them and even for us Hawaii residents is I forget how many they are, but they require a certain number of Hawaiian cultural classes as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
So they were coming back, these students, they were like, I learned this today. We made lei making, or we're learning this, olelo. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Like you guys are learning the indigenous culture of Hawaii, like
Yeah.
that is amazing. And they would come back so excited and yeah. And even for them, it was funny because one of them actually didn't know I spoke Spanish until like a month later when I was on a random phone call with my mom and I started speaking
Mhm.
Spanish and he's like, you speak Spanish? And I'm like, yeah, I told you I was Mexican. He's like, but I thought you're local. And I was like, yeah, but like my parent, I'm first gen, like, we still speak the language.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So even then I think I kind of fit with them on the international side because I had my own like uh culture, but I was like a local resident. So it's just yeah,
Yeah.
they had their fun with me as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we're kind of leading toward this time in your life too that I know was a real, just like huge pivot in your
Hmm.
life, a really big shift. And at this point, you're in college. Your family has been not just in the United States, but in Hawaii for like over 20 years, about 20 years.
So at that
Um,
point, I was, oh gosh, 21. Yeah, about nearing on 20 years. Yeah.
mhm,
Hmm.
mhm. And this is around the time of the first Trump administration that you were going to college.
Yeah, I
And
graduated.
mhm.
I graduated high school in 2014. Yeah, his first administration was in 2017.
And I wonder if leading up to that inauguration or the election itself, there were any conversations that your family was having, or the people in your community, or if it took a while for that to for those topics to start coming up in conversation about the rhetoric and the way that
Hmm.
he was and the people around him were speaking about immigrants.
Yeah. So I had lived all my life with undocumented parents, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that was always a fear,
Mm-hmm.
like a constant fear that we always lived in, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so even though there wasn't much like ICE activity in Hawaii, I think my parents had trauma and fear from living in California, right? And from crossing a border. But
Of course.
California has much more uh immigration activity there, and so it, even though they had migrated across the Pacific Ocean, it was not something that they left behind. They very much brought
Yeah.
it with them. And growing up, I had this fear of just anyone with a badge. Now
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to kind of say it and process that. We were scared of police. We were scared of, ICE, but we were also scared of park rangers and security, like
Mm.
mall, just store security or building security or anything having to do with anyone in a court, like,
Yeah.
all of that. So I had this fear. I used to call it an irrational fear of white vans because, like, for some
Mm-hmm.
reason that would freak my parents out. And now today, I'm like, that was definitely not an irrational fear.
Yeah,
But
not
I
at
couldn't
all.
really
Mm-hmm.
place it. And I feel like we had this fear all the time. And so come 2017, when I was in college, my parents had already been through, they had already gotten stopped at that airport. Right. And so they
Mm.
had already been detained by immigration once. And it had been a couple of years. They had let my mom go. They had stopped bothering her, but they were still summoning my dad to these
Mm.
deportation proceedings. I believe because my mom is the daughter of a bracero, and she
Right.
had an active process going on, but because my parents were not married, legally married, you know, they were still summoning my dad to check in every so often.
Got it.
And my dad had,
Can we
yeah,
touch on the bracero thing real quick? And I
yes.
talked about the program
Hmm.
in my family's story.
Hmm.
And I want to talk about like your grandfather, your mom's dad,
Yes.
didn't decide to like stay in the United States, even though he became a citizen through the bracero
Yes.
program. Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
So he also became a citizen, but he decided to go back to Mexico and like had kids there. And
So I know that we had talked about how it differs from our grandfathers
mm-hmm,
because yours decided to stay and migrate his family out here.
mm-hmm,
And so my grandfather had been, again, coming back and forth, had gotten his residency and then his citizenship, and had actually, when they were allowed, and I'm not sure about like the dates, but they
yeah,
were, he applied for social security numbers for his
mm-hmm,
remaining minor children. Um,
mm,
and so I believe that that's what started kind of the process
okay,
of them trying to get American legal
yeah,
status.
mm-hmm,
But it wasn't very much like an emergent thing. It wasn't priority on his list. He just wanted his legal status because my grandfather loved Mexico and my
yeah,
grandmother did too. So their plan was never to move here. It was just
mm-hmm,
he wanted the legal status to be able to come back and forth without having to cross a border,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
In that way, on foot and to be safe, right? So
yeah,
that's, I guess, why. We've also talked about sometimes the machismo that's in our culture, right?
sure,
And so
mm-hmm,
he's like, why does my wife need to have, she's not coming out to
yeah,
work, right?
yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah,
no
yeah,
point in spending that money
yeah,
for her application if she's not going to come and work.
yeah,
Um, so that's what it was as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to like unfold that a little bit more,
Hmm.
so folks kind of understood what why there was this difference between your mom and your dad and their kind of pathways to
Oh,
having
yes.
status. And it was
Yes.
definitely connected to the fact that your mom's dad was a citizen
Hmm.
and was a bracero, and there
Yep.
was kind of at least some sort of path for her to follow.
Yes. And my
Whereas,
my
yeah,
father did not. He did not have any sort of person that could apply for him.
yeah,
So he, yeah. And my grandmother was a single mother, and
hmm,
so my grandfather has never been on any sort of record.
yeah,
And my father turned 15, and he's like, well, it's my turn, to go out and seek a better future. And so that, yeah, he didn't have any pathway. And because they weren't legally married, my mom also couldn't really like hold on to him legally
yeah,
that way. And so, yeah, and he went through, at that point, it was about 6, coming up on 7 years of just having these yearly check-ins.
hmm,
And he had actually had his work permit. So at some
hmm,
point, he was actually even more closer to legal status than my mom.
hmm,
And in 2016, the election, I remember watching it. I was a junior at that point in college, and I remember watching it on television, on like television
yeah,
with my roommate. My roommate is, at that point, she's a white daughter of in a military family.
hmm,
We had become really, really close friends. And I think at that point, there were a lot of friends that I was around that, of course, just did not like Trump's rhetoric and,
hmm,
the just how mean of a person he is, right?
hmm,
So I felt in a way safe that day, but I remember not being able to really express all of the worry that I had because my dad had been in these proceedings for such a long time, and I had never even had that conversation with anyone in school.
hmm,
And I remember watching how he, won, and they were pretty devastated, kind of like, "Oh man," type of thing,
hmm.
And I
They
just
being your family, or
sorry,
or just your
my
peers.
my
Yeah,
peers that were, because
yeah,
we were like in the living room, right? We were
got
doing
it.
an election watch party,
Yeah.
which was my first time voting too.
Hmm.
So it was like my first time being an adult and being involved in these politics of this country that my parents, were not a part of, but I was. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was my first time like exercising this right that I
Yeah.
had for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so when we realized that he had won, but even as I think of it right now, I didn't think of it. I didn't think of it as like, this is what's next for us and my family. Right. I just thought
Yeah.
of like, yeah, my people and my community are going to be more in danger, but
Yeah.
you don't actually think that it's going to happen to you
Yeah.
until it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the like psychology of it, is that no matter who you are, you don't think it'll impact you. And
Hmm.
then it does.
Yeah.
Um,
Because again, my dad had a work permit. So,
right.
he was kind of on his way, and I was going to turn 21 soon. So I'd be able
Yeah.
to petition for them. And I just had to get through that finish line, right? Like
Yeah.
just turn 21, which I was November, I was 20. I would turn 21 that following August. So it was like, okay,
Yeah.
it's 9 months and then we're kind of in the clear.
But that next year, just like it happened so quickly where everything changed. And can you maybe, yeah, tell us
Yeah, my
or
dad
share
went
with us
to
your
his
perspective?
next he went to his next check-in, and his work permit wasn't renewed.
Mm,
And we went through a period of like, I want to say 3 months that they would have. His lawyer was just trying to get us to make it to my 21st birthday.
yeah.
So I want to say in March it wasn't renewed, and it was so like tiring because we would go in and he would get denied, and he would get a date. He'd get this paper that would say you need to be out of the country by this date. And then the lawyer would kind of say, we're going to wait until this date, and then we're going to file for an emergency stay.
Yeah.
So it was like you had to wait until like a day before. And then he would file for this emergency stay, and he would get it. And then there'd be like, okay, you have another 30 days. This is your next date that you need to be out by. And so we did that a couple of times. And even when we would go, there was, right, he'd get denied. So we'd have to pay a bond. So my dad would be like in a cell. So I would have to go to the bank, get this check, a 20-year-old $10,000 check, and come back, pay the bond, try to get this paperwork done before 3 p.m. because at that point, then the office closes. And if he stays overnight, then there might be an airplane that's filled and he might just be like shipped out, right? So it's a very like emotionally exhausting process.
Yeah.
And at some point, you know, I had to be there because I'm the oldest daughter. I'm going through this with him. My mom could not be there. And at some point, we would actually bring my brother and my sister for the emotional appeal of like, whatever, I don't know. But his decision was made in San Francisco. You know, part of what Trump's administration did was remove the decision making from the origin, right? So it's like the decision was not made by a judge that was looking at my dad in the face. The decision was made. My dad's file was faxed over to a office in San Francisco, and a judge saw it, probably glanced at it for like 0.5 seconds and, you know, denied it and done. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like the tactic of removing the human element, right? It's the attempt to dehumanize this person so that it is easier to deny them an extended stay or a work permit or whatever kind of status. Because at that point, it just, like you said, it's just a file, you know, that has paperwork, and there's no face to any of that. There's no real human interaction with any of it.
And this was like a community. My father was a well-known community member in the farming, Kona coffee community. There were dozens of letters from farm owners that were like, this guy has helped us throughout the years. He's an outstanding community member. He deserves to stay with his children. His whole family life is established here. There was a bill created for him in Congress, right? Like hereby, put by our senators in order specifically for him to be able to stay. I mean, it died, but to get to that point is pretty huge, right? And this was during a time where it was a shock to the community. And it was a pretty like high profile case.
It's a tight-knit community. To kind of paint the picture for folks who aren't familiar with not just Hawaii, but like the South Kona farming community, it's so tight-knit. And especially if you're looking at the South Kona coffee farming community, like that's even tighter. That community, everybody knows each other. It just, in the way that your dad specifically kind of existed in that community, it's just, he wasn't, we didn't even talk about this, but like he wasn't just harvesting coffee, you know, he harvested coffee and then he became a farm manager and then had his own farm and then his own processing facility and all of this stuff. And it's like, and started managing what, like 20 different farms or something like that?
Yeah. At that point, he was managing about 20 plus farms for different people. And so he went from harvesting to, like I said, he stayed that winter and learned the farm maintenance part. Eventually, throughout the years, he learned, became a farm manager, had his own crew, and then he built his dream of like having a coffee pulping mill for themselves, for them to be able to process their own coffee. So he had become, you know, a figure here, a person that a lot of people knew.
Yeah. So again, just wanting to paint that picture of like, he was an active part of the community and like specifically the coffee farming community in Kona. And so this is why you had all of these other farmers too writing these letters and
Yeah.
trying to support, like write these letters of support and letters of, quote unquote good character to convince the government to let this person stay in
Mhm.
the community that they had known for over 20 years.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, he was denied that.
Yeah. So we got I forget how many rounds it was of like that, right? Extensions, and then finally in July, in June, that was his last appeal. He had exhausted all
Hmm.
options. And so he got a date, July 8th. They tried again and were denied. And the lawyer had already told us, like, I'm going to try to do this, but you've appealed so many times that you've exhausted your options. And so he's like, you're going to have to get on that plane and we're going to figure it out from over there. We're going to continue this process, right? But he's like, but you need to get on that plane because otherwise, then that just kind of like negates any sort of future
Yeah.
argument of like show good faith and good
Yeah.
character and following the rules
Yeah.
and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And my dad didn't want to live anywhere besides Hawaii. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like he wanted to go to another state and be out there. His life was here. So yeah, he got on that plane on July 7th and he was supposed to be out by July 8th. And so yeah, he did. He boarded that plane and we had the hope that he'd be back, pretty soon. But yeah, here we are, almost 8 years. Jeez, it's June 27th. So it's about, just
Hmm.
coming up on 8 years.
Yeah. So at that point, I wasn't as involved with the farming community in Kona at that time. And I still remember like hearing about this though.
Mm. Yeah, people still
Uh,
remember to this day.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
This was 2017.
2017.
So I had just spent time, I'm trying to remember, in Kau, and that's where I had been for a period of time before this all happened. And so this whole experience that your family went through was also just like in the public eye so
Yeah.
constantly. And
Mhm.
again, people who didn't even know you, again, I was living on a completely different part of the island, not working with coffee farmers in Kona at that time. And I still like heard this story and like remember hearing people talk about this thing happening. Um and this is just, I wonder even for you, like having it be put out there so publicly, what that even felt like. And I mean, we see this now with many other families and individuals, and like, yeah, what
Oh
that
yeah.
experience was.
Yeah, I see these videos of, kids petitioning for their parents who are
Hmm.
detained, and I really break for them because I know what that feels like,
Yeah.
and it's exhausting, and it feels very like humiliating in a way,
Mm.
like because you're supposed to put a show on, right? You're supposed to show how devastated you are,
Yeah.
and you go out there and it's just, there's a certain way that you can use media, right? And that news outlets do shine light to stories, but I've become way more careful of who I do
Yeah.
interview with and who I share my story with, because it's someone's life.
Yeah.
And for myself, in the moment, it's like, okay, I'm doing it for my dad, and I will do this for my dad, and I'll cry on camera for my dad, and
Hmm.
I'll let everyone know how scared I am and how my siblings, like they were on camera, and we have that footage out there, just, but it's someone's most intimate moments as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's put
Yeah.
out there, and it's a lot, and it
Yeah.
still hurts sometimes
Of course.
to see. But like I said, I just and then he was deported. So
Right.
in the end, it's like, what? Why did we do this? Right?
Right. Right.
We gave it our shot, but he's still out there, and
Yeah.
yeah, it just kind of feels like you were used, you
Of
know.
course. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
and
And
then
go
some
ahead.
of my community members, friends of like my entire life, we they never ask these conversations. They never ask these questions. So it was also an entire community learning about my parents' status, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden it's like, oh, whoa, you were living here all this time like this, and what do you mean? What does that entail for your family, and how do you grow up like that, and can you
Mm-hmm.
explain this to us? And
Mm-hmm.
um just feeling like you're very exposed. So it was like, yeah, just kind of everyone learning about this secret that you've held for such a long
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about how it was never anything shameful for me, or
Mm-hmm.
for us, because of the way that I've heard and always was surrounded by border stories, and it wasn't something that as a community we feel shame for, or at least growing up, what I got a sense of, like, in the community that I grew up, right? My family, the people that surround me, but it is a secret that we keep, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the
Mm-hmm.
safety of our
Mm-hmm.
people, and all of a sudden this is now bringing into question others, right?
Yeah.
So there was also that, and yeah.
I can't. We've talked about these things so much, and like I feel like we have so many different conversations about these dynamics and everything that not just your family went through, but so many other people, and like in seeing this kind of like happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess I just wonder too, because we've talked about this, like this, and this is a traumatic experience for everybody involved, right? Like this is not this is not something that you can just like easily move through, and you're entering your last year of college
Mm-hmm.
when this is all happening. And I have always been so impressed by you, and you're like the fact that you like finished college in that
Mm-hmm.
next year. I think that takes a lot of will and like drive to make it happen after having this like really traumatic summer and lead up to all of that. And even before all of that, you talking about there always being this fear of anybody with a badge.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to get too deep into it, but I know that this definitely was a really hard time for you to navigate. And somehow, which is I don't I really am just like in awe of, like, you were able to move through this, and you talk about this decision that you just made within yourself of I need to stop. But, I need to stop kind of like sitting in this depression and do something. And
Mm-hmm.
what I don't know if you can explain to me how you came to that conclusion and how you
Oh
got
gosh.
there.
First of all, I finished college because I had to, as a
Yeah.
first gen. It was My dad was always the one to push me to go to school. My mom was okay, I love my mom, but like, she would have been happy if I would have gotten married and had 3 children by now. My mom was like, it's okay. You don't have to go to school. You can just, what are you going to do it? Like,
Mhm.
you're going to get married anyway.
Mhm.
So not married. So she's very worried. Um, but my dad was my person, right? He's like that parent that was like, no, you have to do more. You have to do better than us. And I just had to do it for him. There was like, in my mind, I don't think there was ever a choice. I was so close. I was not gonna stop. And um yeah, I pretty much lived in my car for the last year because I was going back and forth between
Mm-hmm.
the business and school.
So you did that first year go into trying to operate the business.
Yeah, yeah. So my dad left in July, which sucked because harvest season starts in July.
Uh-huh.
So, and I was going back into school for my last year. I think it was actually a year and a half. I had
Mm-hmm.
3 more semesters in the end. So I scheduled my classes to like 3 days. So I had super long weekends, which was Friday through Monday. And I had all my classes Tuesday, Thursday. So I would go to school during those days, and then I would come back to Kona Side, 2.5 drive, which was a personal concert every week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just, 4 hours to really
Yeah.
kill there. And but I my dad had left really amazing people that knew what they were doing, so they just pushed on, and they pushed on for him too.
Yeah.
He was a great team leader, and so they wanted to push through, and they're like, we got this, don't worry, you'll be back, and it'll be here when you come back. And so I was really there to just manage money, and to keep that part going, right, as
Yeah.
best as we could. So that first year was really them
Mm-hmm.
doing all the work. And you know
Did your dad have a name for his business back then?
Yeah, we
Mm.
still operate that. So it's El Molinito.
El
So it
Molinito. Okay.
just
Yeah.
Little Mill. That's his
Yeah.
original business name. Because it's a small one pulper mill. It
Mm-hmm.
does a lot. It does a
It
lot for
does.
one pulper. Um, but it was just like this little tiny, like, and I think it just started because the crew would call it that, right? Because at that point, there'd been many mills that they would deliver to. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is so and so's mill. Go down to Koa's mill. Go over to Greenwell, whatever it was,
Yeah.
and so they had no name for this, and so they started. And it's like, oh, vamos al molinito, right? Because it has a
Okay.
farm on it too. So it
Yeah.
was like, where are we going to now? Vamos al Molinito. That one's next. So it just kind of stayed.
Okay. So, well, I mean,
I forget your question.
no, that was the question, was just like, what was the name of your dad's business? But I was
Mhm.
then just kind of thinking, like, all right, so a year and a half and you graduated. And then did you end up moving straight back to Kona?
Yep, I did.
Yeah.
I moved straight as soon as I graduated. Which again, it didn't really feel like I moved back because I was going back and forth so
Sure.
much every week, just driving from one end to the other end. Yeah, and I settled in for about, was it when we launched Misma Lani was the end of 2021. So
Mm-hmm.
4 years. So I lived here once I moved back for about 3 years without ever really doing much. I was mostly just waiting for him to come back. Yeah, I think I've told you this before. I was like completely miserable. I did not like this life. I moved into his house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was working his business. And so I had felt like my life, like what I had planned for my life, just kind of was pushed to the side. And I was okay for a little while, but I think it came up on 3 years that he had left. And I remember sitting at like the office desk that he had, and it was 3 years. And I was like, I don't think he's coming back, you know,
Yeah.
not anytime soon because this is taking forever. And I had kind of like pushed on this idea that I was just going to wait for him to come back, and that he would come back, and that I would be able to like take my life back, and do what I was supposed to do, which I don't even know at this point. Climbing the American corporate ladder. That's what I
Yeah.
wanted.
Yeah.
Um, I just like settled into this life, and, I'm pretty open about it. I was functioning while drinking on a daily basis, you know,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
that was my way of like making it through. It
Yeah.
was like, we're happy. This is fun. You can just like, this can be my life. But things would just put me on an edge really fast. And
Yeah.
I would get so angry.
Yeah.
I would get so mad and I was always complaining. And then I would see these peers of mine that had gotten married and had children and they hadn't gone to school. And then I was like, well, maybe my mom was right, like, why did I go to school,
Yeah.
And I had, growing up in the coffee fields, I had always heard my parents be like, well, you're going to do better than us, and you're not going to
Mm-hmm.
work out in the hot sun,
Yeah.
and you're not going to pick coffee for the rest of your life. And here I was. I mean, I was processing coffee. I was wet all day. I was exhausted, you know, raking the coffee all day. And I just felt like I had disappointed them in a way. And I was disappointed in my life, right?
Yeah.
Because it was not the vision that I had. And so I think like three years in, and because of these spirals that I was having and these suicidal thoughts and like this
Mm.
hate for my life, my best friend finally convinced me to go to therapy. She had been trying to do this for like a year, and I
Yeah.
was like, no, I'm fine. And it wasn't, there's like the whole stigma in our Latino
Yeah.
community, which I think is leaving, or, we're getting better at it. But first
Yeah.
of all, I was like, I'm not that crazy. That was what I was telling myself. And then there was also the part of like the guilt that I felt like I was attention seeking because it was not me who had gotten deported. It was my dad. And so why was I complaining when
Yeah.
I didn't have to live with this deportation in my mind at that time. I was like, my dad's the one who got deported. And how dare I complain when I'm still in this country and I inherited this business and I'm okay, quote unquote, like okay.
Yeah.
And when everyone was telling me how lucky I was because my dad had
Mm.
left the business for me, and
Mm.
everyone dreams of this. So that was like my moment of like, I need help.
Yeah. Therapy.
Yeah, therapy.
I mean, yeah, we've spoken about this before too, and it's like, yes, this the taboo of therapy. Even myself, like I went through a process of like, I'm not that fucked up. Like, I don't really need to go to therapy. Like, my life hasn't been that. Like, what trauma have I experienced? Like, this is not,
Hmm.
so many people have it worse off than me. And it's that it doesn't matter, you
Hmm.
know? Um, I think that everybody should be in therapy
Yeah.
at one point or another. And for, I would say, the vast majority of us, we should just always, like, this should be a continuous part of our lives is therapy, because there is, yeah, I mean, I think that it just provides us with tools and insight, and there's so much power in being able to just fully dive into something, be honest with yourself and another person, and at the end of the day, like, do the fucking hard work to help yourself,
Yeah.
which like, that's what the goal is. You have to be willing to do the work too.
Yeah. And in helping yourself, you're also bettering your relationships. I was very
Yeah.
resentful. I
Yeah.
felt entitled. I felt like everyone needed to be thankful to me because I was the one sacrificing everything for this family, and no one was ever grateful enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was deteriorating my relationships with my siblings, with my
Yeah.
parents, and there's still hurdles that we go through, right? But
Yeah.
I I was complaining so much about others, and then I think it came to this point where I was like, I can't be doing that. I'm just blaming others without taking full responsibility in whatever
Yeah.
decisions I've taken. And this experience that happened to us is completely unfair, but I need to take my life back because this is my life now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I don't take it, and if I just complain, I'm going to be in this like loop for the rest of my life. And I don't think I'm going to make it to the rest of my life if I just continue to do this.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, seeing the way that you have really taken authority over your own life, and like, we've known each other for, so wait, you launched Misma Lani at the end of 21? that what you said?
Yeah. So I think that's when we,
Yeah, that's like when
yeah,
we
that's when we
first
shared.
started knowing each other.
Hmm.
Less than 4 years, but it's like over that time, over these years, the way that you have kind of just like continued to blossom and open, like be open to so much, and really using this business as a way to like to fuel yourself, and I think regain, yeah, that power and that authority over yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, and it's been like this really, I again, there have been so many times where I'm like, God damn, this is so incredible. And there have been times where the only word that I can use is like I have just been in awe of the power that you have like exuded through this whole experience in your life, and to keep doing it, and not just keep doing it, but like, okay, not only am I going to just run this business, I'm going to make it my own now, because it
Hmm.
is my own. And I'm going to make decisions and make moves that propel it forward, and place it in the direction that I want it to go. Start building new relationships with people. And I mean, I know that that hasn't been easy at all, and yet you keep doing it. And I know we've had so many conversations where you've shared like the difficulties and the hard times, and like questioning your sanity
Hmm.
about like deciding to continue going, and I get that and I
Yeah.
relate. And like, it is, I don't know, it's like this really amazing way that you've taken this situation and created something for yourself. And like I said, I've just many times over been so impressed and so in awe of that drive. And I think of where I was at the age of 20 and 21, and there's no freaking way. Like, there's no freaking way. Even at the age of 27, like I was not thinking about the things that you think about.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah,
And you've been someone, honestly, that has, I feel, has taken me under her wing and like just shown me so many connections and given me so many experiences. And I just, I think about every single person that's been in my journey, right? All of the amazing, most of the time, women that have
yeah,
just taken me and learned my story and just seen me and how, like, not desperate, but like how longing I am to move forward.
yeah,
And then you guys just kind of take me and you're like, okay, I'm going to take you to the next step,
yeah.
So I really,
Well, it's like because people recognize that in you, right? And that's the thing. And I feel like there was, when you were able to have that shift
mhm,
mentally, and seek out the support and make
mhm,
the decision of, okay, I can't be like this anymore. Something needs to change and I need to
yeah,
get help. It's people see that you want to do something more, and not only that you want to, but you actually like, you have the ability to do the next thing. You
mhm,
have the drive, you have the thing. I don't know how to describe it, but I think that is recognizable in you. And I know that people see that, and so it's why they want to help support that. And anybody who's had any level of success is because of the support that they've received along the way from others. And so
mhm.
we know this. Everybody knows this. And like, there is no, it is a fallacy of like the bootstrapping and like doing it yourself, and not, not relying on anyone else. That's false. That isn't real. It does have to be a community effort. You
Oh
do
yeah.
have to have people behind you to support you in one way or another. Um,
And if I think
yeah.
of like the origins of like the very, very beginning of Misma Lani, every little step, I don't know, it's forever. You've built a business. How many, from like the point of choosing a name and
Hmm.
And all the ridiculous time we spend on logos
Yeah.
at the beginning is crazy.
Uh-huh.
How many designs and how many people have, touched the business, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
so many.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm happy to be here, and Misma Lani was my way of honoring my dad, first of all, and
Yeah.
the journey that he took, his life journey, right? My dad is like my soft spot, and I just feel for this kid, that
Mm-hmm.
crossed the border at 15. And I feel for the young dad that I had, and like his joy.
Mm-hmm.
And he still does have joy, but I feel like he hasn't been able to process in the way that I've had the privilege to actually seek out therapy, right? So
Yeah.
I miss that father, and
Yeah.
I do it for that person um that had so much, like, goals and dreams, and he made it, and like today we have a coffee brand that I go out and I sell, and it's small in some people's eyes, but it's huge for me because it's
100%.
it's two generations and even more, if you count like my grandfather, my mom's
Mm-hmm.
dad, like generations of migrating and living in a new world that wasn't necessarily, that didn't feel like theirs. And I
Yeah.
think it came to a point in therapy where my therapist probably was months of having the same conversation over and over, as we all know who have been in therapy, that's how it
Mm-hmm.
goes.
Mm-hmm.
And she kept on asking me, you're free to leave, it's been 3 years, and you keep complaining about it, so why don't you leave?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a part of me was really scared to also face the uncertainty of, like, damn, I keep complaining about this life that I'm living, but what if I can't even make it out there? That was also,
Mm.
and I think that we like to blame. That was part of my blaming of others and of the situation,
Yeah.
so that I could kind of deflect from my own fears of, is it too late to go out and
Yeah.
live this dream? Or what if this dream isn't even worth it? Whatever that is, But in the end, I couldn't let go of, like, that legacy that my dad and his crew had left for me, and that was still there, kind of like holding on to whatever
Yeah.
decision I was going to make.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just started brainstorming a story and a name, and I wanted to also honor all of our Latino community, that, for myself, right? For Misma Lani, this was it. It was honoring the Latino community that I have grown up in and that I have seen work in these citrus fields, picking oranges, lemons, blueberries, cherries, strawberries, chili peppers,
Mm-hmm.
lettuce, all of it, coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And our coffee was not being sold by us, right? It was not
Yeah.
being sold by me, and I was not, and so I'm like, our communities work in these industries, and we rarely get to be the face of them. So that's the step that I wanted to be in our communities, right? As a first gen, I wanted to be that person, and I wanted to flip my dad's story. I wanted to bring light to my story, because I was also tired of it being so gloomy and just
Yeah.
depressing. Like, my dad was deported and now I'm stuck here living this life
Yeah.
that I didn't want. I needed to say, my dad, my family lived through deportation and is separated by deportation, but my dad's foundation did not die here. It did not die with me. And even if I had chosen to, like, go into a different career field, it would have not died there.
Yeah.
We live and we are the very legacy that they
Yeah.
leave. But I was like, damn, we grow coffee. That's pretty cool. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
not seeing this,
Yeah. No,
um
it's like impressive too. And again, the thing that I talk about you with people. And the thing that I'm like, it's not just her own farm and mill. They manage like a dozen other farms. and process coffee for a dozen other farms. And sometimes you're helping sell that coffee too. And I'm just like,
Hmm.
it's a lot.
Yeah.
And I just, again, I hope that you do feel that, like, that pride in your work and what you've done and what you are doing, because it is impressive and it's something to be proud of.
Thank you.
Because again, I mean, if I was in my 20s and faced with the same situation, I do not think I could have done that and then
Yeah.
continue to build off of it and continue to push it further.
And some of those
So,
relationships are still from like when my dad first came.
yeah.
They still process
Yeah.
their coffee with us. So they know me now, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember when your dad used to come and pick my coffee and then he became too good and like, and then and we process their coffee. And sometimes it's not even like for the business, it's literally just to keep that relationship.
Yeah,
And
for
I
the
know that
relationship.
they own, like they sell their own coffee. So I think that's like why I keep going too on processing for others, because it just brings me joy to know that
Yeah.
I'm taking care of their coffee, and then this viejito takes his coffee and sells it on his website, and you know, they're so happy to always be there. And yeah, it's part of, it's still relationships that my dad had, which is insane. Now
Yeah.
they've crossed over to.
Yeah, I know that we could talk about so many things for so long.
Mhm.
And our conversations are always so um, dynamic, and we go into all sorts of different things. And I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing this with everyone. I know I, again, am also so impressed by the way that you show up too, and the way that you are able to continuously share this story with people. And it's kind of now becoming, or it has become, your power, I would
Mhm.
say, in sharing this, because yeah, I know it's not easy to talk about this. And yeah, I'm grateful that you're willing to, because I know that there are a lot of people who are either going through the same types of situations with their families, or they're fearing the same situations. And I think hearing from a voice of somebody who has gone through that and is making something powerful from that is what we need.
I went through it for a couple years alone because I just couldn't reach out, and I
Yeah.
didn't know how to find anyone. A lot of times it feels like you're just seeking someone to trauma bond with.
Yeah.
um, and no one, you feel like no one understands, right? And so I think that it's made me compassionate for complex feelings in people, because
Yeah.
I had a lot of anger and resentment, not towards the system necessarily, because I couldn't even place my anger.
Yeah.
I was angry at my dad for so many reasons. I was angry at my mom. I was, anyone but myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have to work through those feelings as hard as it is. And sometimes even those feelings bring up a lot of guilt in us,
Yeah.
and it doesn't feel good. But my therapist allowed me to say all the things that I couldn't say out loud, that I was
Of course.
shamed for.
Yeah.
And in doing so, we were able to kind of place the correct feelings in the correct spaces and assign them to, it's just like mind blowing sometimes, the
Yeah.
things that your brain does in order to survive
Mhm.
these
Mhm.
experiences. And sometimes it does place weird feelings there, and you have to kind of unravel them. But yeah, sitting there with your feelings is not fun.
Yeah. Not by yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I just hope that, my story helps people, especially our community that's going through it right now. And it's, I don't know what I would say to someone that's like going through it, besides like keep holding on and find people, and
Yeah.
seek the help, because it's valid.
Mhm.
As much as I even thought like, oh, I shouldn't be complaining after my dad was deported. Like, isn't that crazy? but I'm happy that I'm here today, because in a different reality, I might have not been. And it's
Yeah.
very true and very, I don't know, it's just something that I think about today. Like, damn,
Yeah.
I can share my story today,
Yeah.
thankfully.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm glad that you are also here doing this. Okay, and so also just to make sure we're kind of covering all of our bases here too, your mom is now of status, has some sort of documented status.
Mhm.
Can you maybe talk us through what that process was like? Because I know that when you turn 21,
Yeah.
you have to do a thing.
Yeah, the day after I turned 21, I filed my petition for my mom, right? But as a child of, like, me as a petitioner, if I'm the child,
Hmm.
I cannot waive the 10-year time bar that goes into effect for someone who has either overstayed their visa or entered without a checkpoint, and has been in the country
Hmm.
without status. If they have stayed here for over a year, once they step out of the country, a 10-year time ban goes into effect. And so
Okay.
right now, I believe the only way to do that, or to file for a waiver, is sometimes undue hardship, but that is very, very difficult to get. Usually the way is through marriage. A spouse
Hmm.
can waive that. And that's a whole different process. So my mom um, was able to adjust her status and get legal residency through my grandfather's petition, and he had already passed away. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, and when they pass away, you get like 5 years to file the petition, which didn't really affect my mom, since her process was already started
Yeah.
20 plus years ago, almost 3 decades before.
And so, wait, so was she just in like this continuous holding
Hmm.
pattern that whole time?
Yeah, yeah. There's quotas that
Yeah.
limit how many people are processed in a year. If you're not really on top of your lawyer, it also depends if your lawyer is really looking into it or not. There's the financial aspect of it,
Sure.
which is pretty expensive. And even so, it didn't ever get processed. And, she
Yeah.
was just continuously waiting for about 3 decades. And even when she had started to try to go through this process again after my father was deported, I was not, I was actually really angry with her, because
Hmm.
my siblings were still minors and I was still trying to get a foothold on this business and my life. And she was like, I think I'm going to try again. And I
Hmm.
remember telling her, why can't you just wait until these kids are over 18 and can fend off for themselves? Because what am I going to do with another deported parent?
Yeah.
And that was hard too. I think we went through like a hard time between us too, because she could tell. And in her mind, she was like, she doesn't want me to get papers,
Yeah.
I'm like, why doesn't she want me to? And I'm going to do it anyways. And I was just so mad, and always telling her, like, okay, go ahead, do it. And then what? What about me? What about your
Yeah.
kids? And the day that she got her green card, and I see so many videos on social media about people getting their green card, and it's such a happy day for them. And for my mom, it was. But for me, it was just like a sigh of relief on one end, and like a lot of anger on the other, because my dad was gone and he
Yeah.
didn't get this opportunity.
Yeah.
And then it made me feel shitty, because it was like, how crappy of a daughter am I to not be completely happy and jumping up and down, because I felt angry, I'm like, why did she
Yeah.
get it and why didn't he? And he's the provider, and he was the parent that I got along with the most, and all of these
Hmm.
things are really hard to sit with too. And today I'm so grateful, right? So as life goes on, it just flips back and forth, right? Because today I'm so grateful that she decided to do that. Um,
Yeah.
But
Because it isn't a fear now.
not as much, yeah. Even though in
Yeah,
today's society, I mean,
sure.
they don't
Yeah,
even
yeah,
care. They might say my passport's fake, but um,
yeah.
but yeah, I'm okay. And once my mom got her residency, actually, it really freed me because I was able to speak up
Mm,
even more. Because at this point,
mm-hmm.
I had one undocumented parent that I couldn't speak up, I couldn't share my story.
Yeah,
And so I feel
yeah,
like it kind of happened at the same time where I was deciding to take over my own life, but at the same time, my mom had gotten like her status adjusted. And now I was like, oh my God, I don't even think I processed that until after, like months after she had gotten her residency, where I was like, I can say stuff now, I
yeah,
can talk about my
yeah,
parents and like one's deported. How weird, like how crazy is
yeah,
that like I have both sides of the story. Like one got deported and the other one now has her legal status, right? And so
yeah,
we do have lived experience on both ends of the spectrum, and that's baffling in and of itself.
yeah.
But yeah, even going through that process was like an emotional roller coaster. And so my mom had been petitioned for when she was like 20, I want to say. She had filed that petition on her own. Also, the men in the family, because they had money, were able to petition earlier for themselves and pay for that. So my grandfather
Mm,
was petitioning for them, but they were paying the fee,
they were
right?
paying for it.
And so
Yeah.
since
Mm-hmm.
since the women did not have money, it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until my mom had come to California that she had saved up enough money to pay for her application. And my
Yeah.
grandfather was like, "So if you're gonna apply, like, are you gonna apply or are we just letting this go?" Type of thing. Like I'm only doing this now, but it was like, "Are you gonna pay for it? Should we do it
Yeah.
now or should we just, I mean,
Yeah.
you're getting married anyway."
Yeah. Yeah.
So my mom paid for that, and she was about 20, and so she didn't get status until she was like 45. She's coming up on 5 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you know what that did cost?
For my mom, it was the final stretch, because you pay to renew your applications,
Right.
right, every
Like
year.
every
Yeah,
year, right?
which is like an
Mm-hmm.
$800 fee.
Okay.
I still pay it for my dad 8 years later. Like I literally filed two petitions for him the other day, which is like $1,800 for like
Wow.
the, I don't know, seventh time. Um,
So you have to still do this even though he's
de-
deported.
mhm.
This is just to keep the hope, like
Yeah,
to keep the
the
possibility
petition
for him to be allowed
alive.
back,
Yeah,
to keep,
yeah.
yeah. Wow.
So we
Okay.
still file that every year. So my mom's long end stretch was about $12,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, with all the medical examinations, processing fees, lawyer fees, paperwork, miscellaneous paperwork that you need to get notarized and done, and all of this stuff. So at the end, it was about $12,000.
It's so, yeah. I mean, I just like, who just casually has $12,000 hanging around to drop on stuff, you know? And these are the things though that um folks have to save up
Hmm.
for if this is something they even want a possibility of.
Yeah, yeah, and people will pay that money. They will. They'll find it.
Yeah.
Because it's that
Yeah.
important. But it's a big chunk of money that not everyone has, especially with all the other things going against them in this, with the language barriers, the job opportunities that they have. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot. I mean, my dad, I don't even know, it's over $30,000, whatever he paid for all of his proceedings. Still to this day, we're paying. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot.
You know, through this season, we are looking at this one specific facet of people's lives and providing this platform for people to talk about these things in whatever degree they are comfortable with and are able to. And I hope that you will participate in future seasons where we're talking about other things, because I think that there are other parts of your life that are also important to put out there. And there are stories that you have that make up who you are that aren't just this. And
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to invite you into this conversation and ask you to participate because I know, again, just like how important this has been, not just for you, but for a lot of people. And as somebody who I consider a friend too, just again, all of the things I said earlier, like I am so continuously impressed by you. And I know that there's so much power in this story of your life, but I think that there's also a lot of power in the other stories that you carry. And so I hope that you would come on in a future
Oh
season
yeah,
and we can
definitely.
talk about different things. And like I think that there's so many things that we can talk about. And I think this might be the longest episode we have for this first season, and I think that's great, and I don't expect anything less than that because I feel like we've just had some really long conversations about so many things in the last couple of
Oh
years.
yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, there have been of course, always, you have a really great way of just bringing conversation and thank you for following and allowing. It's hard to find friends that you can
Mm-hmm.
have all of this critical thinking and questioning of life
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
beliefs and upbringings. And I always really, truly appreciate just having found you, and having like
Mm-hmm.
life bringing us together.
Yeah.
And I have questioned, my own identity because it does become a really central part of like, who am I if my father had not been deported? And even that
Yeah.
question is like, what? It's so hard. Or who am I without being first gen Latina? Who am I without being coffee farmer? But you know
Mm-hmm.
what? In the end, it's our lived experience, and y es lo que nos tocó en esta vida. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't. I'm like, why am I questioning these things? These things have already happened to me. So let's just move on with what this life expects us to learn, and what
Yeah.
this life is doing for our souls, I want to believe, and what we're meant to do in this one.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm excited to hear this podcast and all the other amazing episodes that you'll be putting out. And also, of course, I'd be honored to be on future episodes. And it's always a learning experience with you. And thank you so much. I also consider you
Thank
a
you.
dear friend.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, yes, I hope you have a good afternoon and a great weekend.
Thank you.
And yes, thank you for participating. Thank you for having this conversation. Thank you for sharing so much of yourself, really over and over again. And so, yes, and thank you for listening. These are our other stories. My name is Madeleine Longoria Garcia. You can listen to this podcast on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Have a great